Imagine a world without the NFL. Super Bowl Sundays no longer exist. No highlight reels of game-winning touchdowns, no arguments about who's the GOAT. Hard to picture, right? But over 100 years ago, professional football was barely a blip on the radar. So, what changed? How did the NFL become the billion-dollar juggernaut we know today? This is the story of the NFL, and it all starts in a small showroom in Canton, Ohio in 1920. 10 teams gathered to form the American Professional Football Association, a startup league with big dreams. Teams that you've probably never heard of, like the Akron Pros and Canton Bulldogs, were among the first pioneers, battling it out on fields that barely drew any spectators. Fast forward 2 years to 1922, the league adopted the name we know today, the National Football League. Yet the NFL struggled to compete with the juggernaut of college football. But as the 1930s arrived, the NFL began to find its footing. The league introduced its first championship game, giving fans a reason to rally behind their favorite teams. And who could forget the big stars from this era like Red Grange and Bronco Nagurski, am I right? These are guys that you've probably never heard of, but they were household names that filled stadiums with their electrifying performances. Thanks to NFL Films, we were able to learn more about some of the insane stats they put up back in the day.
During 13 years of high school, college, and professional football, Red Grange carried the ball 4,013 times for an average of 8.1 yards and scored 531 touchdowns. His astonishing record still stands today.
500 touchdowns is an absolutely insane record. Do you think there's any up-and-coming players who can break it? As we continue throughout the history of the NFL, we enter the 1950s, which marked a major turning point. Television brought football into living rooms across America, and the 1958 NFL championship between the Baltimore Colts and New York Giants captivated millions. Known as the greatest game ever played, it sparked a new level of national interest in professional football. But as the NFL soared, it faced competition. In 1960, the American Football League emerged, challenging the NFL with its flashy play and innovative strategies. For 10 years, the leagues clashed, until they merged in 1970, uniting the NFC and AFC under one banner. The first Super Bowl in 1967 was born from this rivalry, and it would eventually become the NFL's most celebrated event. And fun fact, did you know the first halftime show consisted of 2 guys flying jetpacks over the field? How is it 2025 and we still don't have jetpacks, but 2 guys had them in the 60s? The journey continued into the 1970s and 1980s, a golden age of football that solidified the NFL as a cornerstone of American culture. The Pittsburgh Steelers dominated the 1970s, winning 4 Super Bowls in 6 years behind their legendary Steel Curtain defense and quarterback Terry Bradshaw. Meanwhile, the Dallas Cowboys, known as America's team, thrilled fans with their star-studded roster and iconic coach, Tom Landry. The San Francisco 49ers rose to prominence in the 1980s, with Joe Montana's precision passing and Jerry Rice's unmatched receiving talent leading to 4 Super Bowl victories by the end of the decade. The Super Bowl became the ultimate spectacle during this era. It wasn't just a game, it was an event that drew millions of viewers worldwide. Halftime shows evolved from marching bands to full-scale performances by music legends like Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston. Advertisers began spending millions for just 30 seconds of airtime, knowing the entire country would be watching. As the NFL's popularity grew, so did its reach. The league added new franchises like the Seattle Seahawks and Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the 1970s, and later expanded again in the 1990s with the Carolina Panthers and Jacksonville Jaguars. By 2002, the Houston Texans joined, completing the league's current structure of 32 teams. The NFL also began venturing beyond U.S. borders. In 1986, the league hosted its first international game in London, and later expanded to Mexico City, introducing American football to a global audience. Despite its success, the league faced serious challenges. Player safety became a growing concern, with mounting evidence linking concussions to long-term health issues like chronic traumatic encephalopathy, aka CTE. Iconic players like Junior Seau and Mike Webster brought attention to the devastating impact of repeated head trauma. The league responded with significant rule changes to reduce dangerous hits, improved helmets, and strict concussion protocols. Technology also played a major role in shaping the modern game. Instant replay was introduced in 1986, giving officials the ability to review critical calls and ensure accuracy. By the 1990s, television networks invested heavily in cutting-edge graphics and camera angles, making the viewing experience as exciting as being in the stadium. I mean, just look at this insane shot of Aaron Donald. This literally looks like something out of a video game. I remember when I saw this shot live, I had to do a double take to make sure it was actually real. Safe to say the camera quality used in the NFL has come a long way. But where are we today? By the 21st century, the NFL had firmly established itself as America's favorite sport, achieving what seemed unimaginable in its humble beginnings. What started as a meeting of 10 teams in a Canton showroom had grown into a cultural phenomenon that connected millions of fans across the globe. Fantasy football, born from the league's obsession with stats and strategy, revolutionized how people engaged with the game. Suddenly, fans weren't just rooting for their favorite teams, they were managing their own virtual rosters, cheering on individual players with an intensity that rivaled Super Bowl Sundays. This surge in fan participation was reminiscent of the NFL's earlier strategies, like bringing games to living rooms through television in the 1950s, or capturing national attention with the greatest game ever played in 1958. Just as those pivotal moments expanded the league's reach, fantasy football deepened fan engagement, keeping millions glued to their screens for every touchdown and tackle. I guess if one good thing came out of all of this, it's the emergence of Scott Hanson, the host of NFL Red Zone. Through it all, the NFL saw rapid growth in the 21st century. Its revenue skyrocketed thanks to global fan engagement. Fantasy football kept fans more connected than ever, and streaming services brought games to every corner of the world. Today, the NFL is more than a sport. It's a symbol of how small dreams can lead to cultural revolutions, and it's not going away anytime soon. Thankfully for us, we get to enjoy all the highlights every Sunday and have endless debates about who's the GOAT. Speaking of which, who do you think the greatest of all time is? Let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to never miss future videos like this.